Good morning, everybody. This is our second day of DecisionCAMP, and today the first presenter is Stefaan Lambrecht. Stefan is a very experienced business architect, and he is, I can say, business process guru. Stefan presented at several previous DecisionCAMP, and he has, I believe, excellent skills sharing his real-world experience in building decision-making systems. He specialized in enterprise architecture, business process, and business rules management, and he's using what he calls tripod. Do I pronounce correctly? Tripod, yeah. And this is combination of three major standards: DMN, BPM, and CMNN. Let's see what we will hear today. Stefan,
yeah,
stage is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Jacob. What I'm going to talk about today, in fact, the reason why I decided to give this presentation was a remark that you made, Jacob, when I had written an article about decision-centric orchestration, and where you asked the question, and probably it's a right question. What you're talking about, is that now orchestration, or wouldn't it be choreography? And yeah, I thought that was a really good question, and I didn't have an immediate answer to that because I don't think it's a black or white thing. Some things are in the middle. So I started thinking about it, and so that's the result of that thinking, or of these reflections, are in the presentation that I'm going to give. It's more a kind of a, let's say, a philosophical approach, let's say, to the things we are doing with decisions and with processes and with case handling, etc. Myself, I started doing process modeling and process documentation as from the early 90s. And in the 90s and the years 2000, a lot of organizations were focusing primarily on getting their processes right. In that period, decision modeling was not yet really existing. There were some efforts, obviously, with rule engines, etc., but how they would fit into a process model or a case model, etc., that wasn't clearly defined. And finally, DMN came up and gave an answer to that. The decision modeling gave an answer.
Unmute yourself. We don't hear you, Steve. Steven?
Yeah. I think I will, probably it's because you started recording and then I didn't reply or so.
And you're not sharing your screen. Please share your screen again.
Yeah, okay. So, are you seeing my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's because you started recording and then I should have clicked the button. So I'm going to, you haven't heard anything, I suppose, so I'm going to start all over again. So thank you, Jacob, for the introduction. What I'm going to talk about today, in fact, the reason for my presentation was a remark, Jacob, that you gave when I had written an article on my blog about decision-centric orchestration. And the question that you raised then, a very right question, I think, was what you're talking about, is that now orchestration, or isn't it choreography or something in between? And I thought that was a very interesting remark, so I started thinking about it, and The result is in this presentation. So it is a kind of a philosophical approach to the things we're doing with process definitions and decisioning, etc. Myself, I started modeling processes as soon as, in fact, process management came by. That was the early 90s. And I must say, in the 90s and the years 2000, a lot of organizations were really focusing on getting their processes right, analyzing them, improving them, etc. And decision logic at that point in time was still not really well defined and certainly not well connected with the process logic. And when DMN came by and when decision modeling started coming up, then that gave an answer to that. Yeah. And an observation that I made and I've been making over the last years, that is that organizations, and they still do that, are focusing a lot on processes, on process flows, and they do that using BPMN. They do that recently with CMMN for case handling. There are a lot of workflow engines in place, event-driven architectures, orchestration platforms, etc., etc. But if you look at it, and then you see that organizations that doing that, they keep on struggling with getting their processes and certainly the customer service delivery right. And the reason, as far as I'm concerned, is because they optimize a flow of work, but they don't realize that, in fact, in order to optimize it, the first thing you need to do is getting clear within which boundaries you deliver services, etc. So the real value is somewhere else than in the process. The process is, to me, a kind of a logistical thing. But the content of what you're handling is in decisions. And making the right decision, that is the real value that comes out of it. So what I would like to do today is to argue that we've been putting the processes at the center of everything for too long, and that it's time to put decisions at the center. And let's see. Yeah, problem moving my slide. Okay. Okay, and let's then perhaps before we actually start talking about decisions, revisit two concepts that every one of us knows, and also what the remark that Jacob made following my article fits into that. What is really orchestration and what is choreography? Yeah. If you think about orchestration, the easiest thing I think to do is to think about a symphonic orchestra where you have a conductor and he controls or she controls everything that's going on. And in a symphonic concert or in a classic music concert, it's very important that everything is well orchestrated, because if it's not the case, then it ends up in some kind of chaos. If we look at processes, we see the same thing. So if you have process orchestration, then there is a central system or an engine. It can also be a decision engine that controls everything, that decides what needs to happen next, who needs to do it, when it needs to be done, and that also follows up everything. And all the participants in the process or in the delivery of customer service, they follow, in fact, the instructions from the central authority that asks them to do something. Choreography is some kind of an other approach. Yeah. There you do not really have a conductor that is really deciding everything. And in fact, in choreography, what happens is that the participants in the process, for instance, they act based on events that happen and on a common understanding of what needs to be done or should be done, etc. And they react also by responding to interactions with one another. Yeah. So here there are some agreed rules, agreed behaviors that are in place, but everything depends obviously on how everyone plays his or her role. Yeah. And when we look at organizing processes or cases or whatever in organizations, I don't think we need to choose one of both. I think in most situations, in most business cases, we will need to choose in certain parts of the process to choose for more orchestration or for choreography. And so the question is, what approach will work? And the first thing I need to say is that neither of these approaches is wrong. They're all right, but it depends on when you will choose them. The advantage of orchestration is that it provides us with a lot of maximum governance, traceability, compliance, etc. And that works well, obviously, if these processes that we need to execute and to perform are fully predictable, are structured, and you will also want to do that if you want a lot of visibility and control. So that is the one end. On the other hand, and when we see the appearance of other ecosystems or also AI agents, distributed services, etc., orchestration doesn't always work. Yeah, we need to have much more flexibility in executing or performing business activities. Yeah, and that works well certainly if multiple parties are involved that are not always in the same organizational boundaries. Yeah? So you have a lot of autonomy, but the hard part, obviously, is that it's very hard to, or that it's harder to monitor end-to-end what is happening. You have less centralized control. And if there is an issue, resolving it can be quite difficult. Yeah? So if we put them side by side, this table summarizes a little bit the differences. So when you have an orchestrated, let's say, customer service, then control is very centralized. In a choreography, it is more distributed. When you look at decision making, and that is also the case if you have a decision-centric approach. As long as there is a decision model taking decisions, you also have one central point that takes these decisions. So that's more orchestration as far as I'm concerned. If you have a situation where each participant can decide for himself what needs to happen and how it needs to happen, then you're more in a choreographic way of working. Yeah. So the orchestration is more deterministic, it's more linear, it's usually also more sequential, where the other one is more event-driven, also based on unexpected events, adapts to the situation all the time, etc., etc. Yeah. So if you compare these, you could say that orchestration is more like a symphonic orchestra, whereas choreography, you could compare it with a jazz band jamming. Yeah. And we could say the traditional way, and what I see is, and what I've seen a lot, is that organizations are defining processes, usually in BPMN. They're rather sequentially built, and it seems that everything is under control and that everything works, but in the end, in fact, it isn't. Yeah, because what you have in a process-centric approach of a business service, and I'll get to an example right away. That is that the decisions that need to be taken, they're scattered around the process. So you have some decisions at the beginning, some in the middle, some at the end, etc. And it's the process that needs to orchestrate these decisions. So that is when you use this at a larger scale and in a more complex environment, that is very difficult to keep it right. And I'll give an example immediately. So let's take an example. The example that I'm going to take is the example of an insurance claim, a travel insurance claim, for instance. When you see a travel insurance claim or another insurance claim, what you see is that during the end-to-end handling of this claim, a lot of different things need to happen and a lot of different decisions need to be taken in order to get to the end. The first thing you will probably do, and usually it's also chronologically that way, that is to decide, okay, I'm receiving a claim. Is that claim eligible or not? Yeah. The customer who hands in the claim, do we know him? Does he have a contract with us? The kind of incident or damage that he has, is that something that is covered by the products that we sold to him, etc., etc. Then you also have a second kind of decision that comes later on. Once, in fact, the purpose of eligibility is usually just deciding whether, as an insurance company or as a claim handler, you will handle the claim, yes or not. The second step is then usually, okay, looking at what really happened, what damage is there, and is it caused by what exactly, and are the conditions to compensate or to be willing to compensate the damage, are they there, are they present or not? And if not, you will probably say, okay, we refuse to compensate. And then the other decision, once you decide that, is to really determine what will be compensated. So you will calculate based on certain rules, compensation amounts or other types of compensation, such as repair or replacement of damaged goods or whatever. You also want to take some decisions about if you discover or if you suspect that there might be fraud in place, to also analyze that. And there are then, in the end, once you have compensated your customer, you will need to take other decisions about if there is an other party liable for the damage, that you will recover these costs that you made or the compensations that you have been given. Now, in most cases, when we look at how this is handled within a lot of organizations, a common approach for this is to build a sequential a sequential process model that handles these different steps and milestones in the handling of the claim. And at every point where you need to take a decision about eligibility, about acceptance, about compensation, etc., to build separate decision models for all of these decisions. So these decisions are then orchestrated within a process model. And that can be in BPMN or in CMMN, it doesn't really matter. But the process or the claim handling model, they orchestrate also the sequencing of the different decisions. And as such, it seems okay. So this approach seems very modular, seems very clean, seems very structured, but in the end, it creates a number of structural problems. And what are these problems? There are three, in fact, big structural problems. First of all, you depend on the process correctness in order to guarantee that your decisions are really taken in a correct way, but certainly also that all decisions that need to be taken are taken. So if you design a process in which you first take an eligibility decision, then sometime later in the process you take a decision on acceptance, etc. Suppose that you would redesign your process, or that you make a variant of your process and you forget to call certain of these decision models, then you have a big problem, because part of the decisioning will not be executed, and you could take the right actions and activities and deliver the wrong things to your customers. Yeah. The second thing is a customer service, such as claims management, is not a sequential thing. You may think of it, okay, if in an ideal situation, you first handle eligibility, then you handle, and that is then something that is done, a milestone that is reached, and then you go to acceptance, and then that is a milestone that you've reached, and so on. But in the life cycle of a claim, information or data from the customer do not all arrive at the starting point of the claim handling. So it may be that certain information appears afterwards that in fact jeopardizes the decision that you already took about, for instance, eligibility. And then you have a problem with your process, because once you see that, you have to make the process loop back and to the initial decisions, and then you need to see what kind of things that you decided afterwards are still valid, etc. So it becomes really a very spaghetti-like way of handling these things. Yeah. And another thing is you also block, in fact, straight-through processing. Yeah, because what you force is you always force to follow the same steps in the process, and sometimes it is not really necessary. So what we should do to avoid that kind of situations is, in fact, not put the process first, but put the decisioning first. And the experience that I have is that it's a very good practice then to stop orchestrating disconnected decision logics and decision models and put everything in one integrated decision model that handles, in fact, in a 360-degree way, all the aspects of, in this case, for instance, a claim handling. What that gives as an advantage is that instead of having all of these disparate and scattered around models for different aspects of a claim, you get one comprehensive view that integrates all the decision logic that you need for the entire decision handling, that also makes clear what are the dependencies between these decisions, and that does not depend on the process logic, and that it evaluates these decisions based on all the complete data that is available for the case. So every time something changes in the case, you let that same decision model have a look at it again, and that model can then determine what is in fact the decidable state of a case. What is ready to be decided, what is not ready to be decided, what things are still missing. All of that can be evaluated by that integrated decision model, and from there the decision model can then decide to organize actions in the different domains that need to be handled throughout the claim. So for instance, what you see here is there is a decision model. It's an integrated model. It looks at all aspects about eligibility, about acceptance, about compensation, about fraud, etc., about recovery. And it will suppose that you have at the beginning all the input data, in your input data, you have everything that is needed to take a final decision and even to pay out the compensation, etc. You just throw it through the decision model. The decision model verifies everything, and then the decision model will decide what activities need to be still executed and will kick off the right processes and the right cases, etc., that need to handle all of that. So in fact, your decision model becomes the single source of truth for everything. The advantages of that are multiple, obviously. You get consistency around all channels that you handle, even if you have multiple processes handling also different variants of claims or different types of claims for different channels, whether it be web portals or more manual handling of claims or whatever. They use the same decision logic. It's also transparent because you always, in a consistent way, do the same thing, take the same decisions, apply all of the decisions that need to be applied, all the rules that are needed, and you can fully explain what is needed. You can also easily optimize and simulate changes in the process and in the delivery of your customer service. And if you have straight-through processing, it happens in a very controlled way and a very qualitative way. So what we see here is, in fact, the usage of decision intelligence as really the orchestrator of everything that needs to happen. And the process, in fact, is dependent on what the decision intelligence will dictate, will determine. Yeah. So what I recommend is do not distribute decision logic about certain customer services or whatever across different tasks and across different processes. Don't let the process orchestrate when a part of a decision logic needs to be applied. Don't rely on sequencing in the process to ensure decision completeness, and on the contrary, build one central integrated decision model per core business process. Reevaluate whenever data changes in a case, reevaluate the complete case using that model, and let then the model decide what can be decided about the customer service, and let it organize requests that can be executed by the process or by the case management environment. And this way you get a much more flexible handling of, for instance, claims. You can always respond to all kinds of real-time events that happen. Every real-time event that happens, so every change in data leads to a complete review of the case you're handling and will then lead potentially to processes that need to be executed, activities that need to be organized, etc. So you assess continuously what is happening, you adapt immediately, and you respond smart to whatever is coming in. And then the final question, and that's then the end of the presentation is this then orchestration or choreography? Well, I think it is both. It's if you look at such a central, I call it a central spider DMN model that reacts to everything that pops up. In fact, everything that can be initiated by such a DMN model, as far as I'm concerned, it is orchestrated. Where it becomes choreographed, that is when you let loose, in fact, the control on the execution of certain parts of the customer service deliveries and the services that you're delivering. Yeah, where you put, in fact, the frontier or the degree of choreography versus orchestration has a lot to do with how much unpredictability do you allow or do you accept in your customer service. And that depends a lot, obviously, on the industry you're in, on the rules that you need to apply and need to follow, etc., etc. Yeah, and all of that can then lead to a more decision-centric business delivery. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, and I'm very happy to discuss a number of questions or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. And you already initiated a serious discussion on chat. And
Okay.
I'm sure it's a topic that many people thinking about. And
Yeah.
so I will let people to take, or you can choose questions. Or Paul, do you want to start? Alan. Alan.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Paul.
Paul, go ahead.
Oh, no, after you, Alan, after you.
Okay. I just wanted to say, Stefan, I agree with you entirely. This was the model which I converged on during my time doing PS with FICO. I've given a couple of papers on this approach at this conference, the first one 10 years ago. So I'm completely in alignment with you. Just to say, one of the issues I found with it was that a lot of clients were reluctant to lose their process models and surrender them to this idea that they're specifying declaratively when they need certain things done in the decision model. I found that quite a difficult concept to get across to people. But I think you're right about the benefits of that approach. Yeah,
I agree with you, and I have seen that also quite a lot of times. You know, in the 90s and the years 2000, a lot of effort has been put in bringing processes and process models, etc., in the organizations, and the BPMN model, the swim lane models. A lot of people are familiar with them, and if they need to switch to something else that they do not always understand very well in terms of concepts, etc., there is some time needed to convince them and to take away the fear that they have that they lose control. Then, I think one of the benefits that
AI might give us here is well, one way I found of getting around it is to generate example use cases. In other words, sort of hypothetical process flows that result from the application of the decision model, and you could actually generate a full complement of those, just maintain the decision model now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
Paul.
Yeah, no, thanks, and likewise, Stefan. I totally concur with your, I think, central thesis, which is modeling decisions in an organization is more important in the process. In fact, you can also argue that for everybody looking at rebuilding processes in AI agents or business process reengineering, if they focus on the decisions that need to be made, then clarity will be brought to both approaches. I was just going to ask: do you find it really useful to have a discussion about choreography and orchestration anyway? I know it's a orchestration of tasks, etc., is a big topic in AI agents. But is from a decision perspective, is it really, is it what you were just said in terms of just, pacifying the process teams at organizations, and is in their conversion to understanding decision management? Is that true, or do you think that choreography and orchestration is still really a vital part of the decisioning story?
Well, I think it's important. And I think AI agents have brought the importance more obvious, because suppose that you ask an AI agent to do something, to perform something, then yeah, you don't know what is happening and what processes and stuff that the AI agent is really doing. So you lose a lot of control. But even in a world without AI agents, you kind of have the same thing. As long as you keep full control, you're in an orchestration mode. But sometimes you need to leave that orchestration mode because you cannot, certainly if you work together in a specific customer service or whatever with external parties or other organizations, so you have a cross-organizational way of working, then it is difficult to maintain a 100% orchestration. But even within an organization, sometimes you can kick off other processes from within a specific process, and you do not always want to keep full orchestration, because then it becomes too complex, in fact, to work together. So, and in that way, it's more a choreography kind of thing. But as long as you keep the control, then then we're talking about orchestration. But it's not always, it's not black or white or something like that, I would say.
Excellent. No, that makes sense. And I like the description of it being a control aspect as well.
Yeah.
So organizations, as you said, do love their processes, and that makes them feel that they're in control. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And what I would like to add also, and that is perhaps also what Alan perhaps also meant, when you have processes in place and they're documented, organizations think they have control. They have the perception that they have control. Whereas you only get real control when you have decision logic in place. Yeah. So I think a lot of organizations have the impression that they're in control of everything because they have processes, but it's important what is behind these processes in terms of decisions and how they are managed to get really control.
Okay, you can see that Arash is pointing that such orchestration can lead to a monolithic decision model that's difficult to maintain. Arash, do you want to talk about this?
Hi. Do you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we hear you.
So I agree with you, Stefan. So the challenge is to find that balance. So if you put similarly, imagine you have a decisions requirement diagram, and you can kind of create a decision table that contains all the rules, and that all of a sudden becomes the big bucket of rules problem because you have one table with all the rules, right? So then you can argue going back from that reusable abstraction level of the decision intent. And that same principle applies when you have merged multiple decisions requirement diagram into one gigantic one, which solves the problem you want to solve. But all of a sudden, we lose that reusability, the understanding of individual cluster of the decision, the impact they have on each other. So sure, you solve one problem, but you fall into the other problem of having a big model to maintain. And
I do not entirely agree with that. It depends on how you construct your decision models. When I construct a decision model, like the one that I explained, it contains a lot, obviously, but the individual pieces of logic, they are reusable. They are in different models, and it's the decision model that orchestrates everything instead of the process. Yeah. So if you do it that way, then you keep that reusability.
Yes, I agree with the reusability, but that doesn't solve having a big model have many things to do.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yes, reusability comes from the not the decision, from the logic that you expose as a function and you call that function and you have that reusability. That's true, but then still we have a problem of having a big model doing so many things, which many part of it are irrelevant at certain point in time. So that's a challenge neither BPMN nor CMMN can solve.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else wants to ask questions? Okay, I would probably make a few comments because I like idea of choreography, and it's a lot sounds very similar as an opposite to orchestration, central orchestration. But in reality, when we build big decision models, we have a lot of loosely coupled decision services. And loosely coupled means they don't know about each other. And it's a contrary to what we have in what we have usually in choreography, because so from this perspective, because we still, most of us develop loosely coupled services, we need more like orchestration. And for many years, our customers, does not matter what platform you use, for orchestration, people use BPM engine, or they use AWS steps, for example, or in practice, for example, our customers usually define rule flow with all these conditions: execute this service, if results is such and such, then execute this service, skip these two services, but necessary to execute another service, like you described. And this is kind of complex logic, but maintained by human, and they really like it, like Alan said. They don't want to get rid of control of this. But still, we did recently some experiments. We feed with old LLM. This is your problem context, and you have this number of loosely coupled services, and please answer customer question in particular situation. So we wanted, objective was, can LLM play role of orchestrator instead of us telling exact sequencing and different conditions. And I was extremely pleased to see that how based on actual input, each service has its input and has its output, and this is publicly available information for LLM. LLM doesn't know anything what inside services, but then LLM, based on actual input, started to invoke or to skip other services, and this was I personally was extremely impressed with such understanding of orchestration. So from this perspective, I believe LLM today does quite a good job, already does very good job as an automatic orchestrator. So anybody has the same experience or a negative experience as LLM as an orchestrator?
Can I add something, Arash, here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Jacob, I agree with you with the having a loose couple decision that are exposed with services, and we have had experience similar to what you mentioned. So we expose multiple of these decisions as a tool to LLM, and then based on the context within the specific scenario, they can choose which one of them are relevant with the metadata that you provide, what are the inputs, etc. However, having said that, the problem is as soon as your input goes to LLM and comes back, there's no guarantee they provide all the required information. So you may reach to some retries, and you may reach to some issues with validation of inputs and outputs. It has its own challenges, but yes, so that's one of the other options.
So it's your experience is not reliable enough yet, and I really want to know other people's experience, because we did it for just several services, and maybe we were lucky, or LLM was lucky. I'm not sure if in production, it wasn't production, it was more like demo, and I'm not confident to recommend our customers to use LLM as orchestrator already, but we're more kind of in the research phase. But probably future still will show that you don't need orchestration, could be completely automated. That's big suspicion. What is your belief? Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, Richard.
Richard?
Sorry, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm understanding this. So if what I say doesn't align, it's because I've misunderstood a little of it. My experience is it works until it doesn't. And I was really interested in your talk where you talked about sequencing and not and the dependencies, and finding that you've got long lists, which of course are going into the decisions. I found, I mean, like we had a session yesterday where they talked about creating a rules book from which to orchestrate the development of code, you know, something like SpecKit, which was helping you to then create lists of inputs to your decisions, which I found very effective. The problem was the software became very list oriented until the LLM broke with the list. It got too complicated for it, and then I would have to cut the list in pieces and start creating the smaller services. But every time I asked the LLM, do you want to continue doing it this way, or should we break it into smaller pieces? It always came back and told me that we should continue as it is until we have a problem. So it's almost like saying you should orchestrate it until it doesn't work, until it breaks, and then you need to know when it breaks so that you can then choreograph the decisions you then make after that. And as I say, I think I understood what this lecture was about, but if that feels like I've wandered off, then I apologize, but that was my feedback.
Okay. Yeah.
Stefan? Okay. Okay, we still have a few minutes. I want to share more like a question. While I'm optimistic about LLM, we actually devoted in Open Rules a lot of efforts to automate orchestration. And we do have for a long time automatic build of orchestration logic. But it was not always possible because we know all dependencies between services using input and output only. But then we stuck with very simple situation. Let's say you have two services and they both provide output, modify the same decision variable. Let's say, so it's output, similar output, but completely different. We don't know how. In this case, just human logic, logically, it's impossible to tell what service should be executed first. If you look only on input and output, you cannot make this decision. So how LLM can make this decision if we humans cannot make this decision, sequencing decision in this situation? So it means in certain moment, LLM, like a human, LLM will certainly make mistakes because it doesn't know about content. Maybe there are some side effects, other variables will be changed, and you don't know in what order to execute two decision tables, for example, with the same output, with shared output. So I would, being optimistic, is still probably human logic is involved until we allow LLM to know what is inside our services. And that's not always our intention. Okay. Anybody? Okay. Stefan, it's as usually you bring a lot of interesting questions and from practical perspective, from trenches of decision systems. And thank you very much for this presentation. And thank you everybody for good questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.